My name is Ann Haag, and I am a practice management advisor here at the CBA. And we are here today to talk about how to create accessible PDFs using Adobe Acrobat DC Pro. Before we dive in, I wanted to cover a few basics. I included this works cited in your materials. I borrowed a lot of information. So I was learning this as I went. And I learned a lot from a webinar by Christy Blue called How Do I Know If My PDF is Accessible? So if you have further questions about this, that's a really good starting point, as well as the accessibility features section in Adobe Support. I did want to offer the disclaimer today that the more I read about this issue, the less I felt I really knew. It was a little bit more technical than I expected, and it's not really an area that has a lot of quick, cover-all, easy answers, unfortunately, which I know is what a lot of people tend to want when they sign up for these tech classes specifically. So keep that in mind as we go through. I also wanted to say that I'm not an expert and I do not have hands-on experience with screen readers or other tools that we'll talk about today. Under ideal circumstances, this class would either be taught or taught by somebody who meets those qualifications, but these classes have time constraints and there's a whole department's worth of programming going on. And so that wasn't able to happen today. But I would like to consider this the start of an ongoing conversation about accessibility here at the CBA. I do not have all the answers today, but I will continue trying to learn and convey that knowledge to our members because I think this is a really important issue. It's just more complicated than I initially thought when I came up with the idea for this program. So consider this a start, not the end. All right, so first things first. We'll go through this. I'm gonna just run through my slides initially, and then we can actually jump in and do the more demo-heavy stuff in Adobe and see where all these features are. So I'm gonna skip this for right now, but I just wanna point out that before you do anything in Adobe, you have to actually add the accessibility menu to your main menu in Adobe, which I'll show you how to do in a minute. Also, I want to stress that if you have any questions, especially in the room, please feel free to ask them. You can just raise your hand and interrupt me. I do not mind at all. I find that these classes are best when they're as interactive as possible. So what do we mean when we talk about accessibility? I think that's a word that's thrown around a lot. So let's kind of really hammer out a definition for what we're talking about right now. A document or application is accessible if people with disabilities such as mobility impairments, blindness, and low vision can use it. Accessibility features in Acrobat Reader and PDF. Oh, sorry.
Conference will automatically end in 30 seconds.
Hold on, we're having issues with the webcast. Accessibility features in Acrobat Reader and PDF file format enable people with disabilities to use PDFs with or without screen readers, magnifiers, and braille printers. Making PDFs accessible tends to benefit all users. For example, the document structure that enables a screen reader to read a PDF out loud also enables a mobile device to reflow and display the document on a small screen. Similarly, the preset tab order of an accessible PDF form helps all users, not just users with mobility impairments, fill the form more easily. So it's really beneficial to everyone to make your PDFs more accessible. It just means that you have a more thought out document. So the reason why in the title of this class today I specified that we're dealing with Adobe Acrobat DC Pro, I know that there are a lot of different versions of Adobe out there, and so I just wanted to give an explanation for that. All versions of Adobe have features to support the reading of PDFs by people with different accessibility needs, but Pro is the only option for most tasks needed to create accessible PDFs. So a person with a screen reader and only the reader version of Adobe will be able to read a PDF easily if it was created by someone using accessibility settings available only in the Pro levels. So if you are actually creating accessible PDFs, you have to have that Pro version. So that's important to realize, and that's why I specified it in the title. But anybody with just the reader version, which is the free version of Adobe, if a PDF is accessible, they'll be able to use it with just Reader. And then DC means Document Cloud. That's not as important today. You could have either of the Pro versions and still be able to do everything that we're talking about today. Document Cloud just means that it's cloud-based instead of installed on your computer. So what is in a PDF? Before we go further, I think it's important to get a few things straight. So there are 3 different layers in a PDF. There's the visual layer, which is what you see when you look at a PDF. There's the content layer, which is the textual information that is associated with the visual layer. In an accessible PDF, the reading order of the content layer mimics the order implied by the visual layer of the document, so they correspond. And then there's the 3rd layer, which is the tag layer. This contains the PDF tagging structure, which, if anyone is familiar, it's similar to like HTML markup for a web page that is used by assistive technology. So tags help assistive technology determine paragraphs, lists, tables, form elements, etc. Without tags, a PDF just appears to assistive technology as either blank or one large block of text. You can view the tags on the left side menu, but you first have to search for the tag tool, which I'll show you how to do in a minute. Something that is endlessly frustrating with Adobe for a lot of people is that there are so many abilities and tools within Adobe, but they're kind of hidden. And so you have to either know where to look, and usually there's like more than one place to look, or one way to get to something, or you have to know the word that you're looking for, and so you can just search it. What does a quick accessibility checklist look like? You want to look for renderable text, so text versus image. You want text to actually be readable. An image isn't readable, obviously, and so you have to have text that like describes that image. Navigation structure, so those PDF tags are in a logical reading order. Text descriptions and non-text descriptions. Table structure. Tables get a little bit more complicated, which we'll touch on later. Form elements, including tab order and reading order. Luckily, there's a tool built into Adobe that does all this for you, so you don't have to remember that checklist. It'll run through and check it. This accessibility checker is built in, and it gives you a detailed report on accessibility. It's not perfect, but it's a great first pass. I'll show you how to run this in just a minute. It automatically checks all the items on that quick checklist for you, it gives you some guidance on how to resolve issues that do arise. And sometimes some issues it just fixes automatically for you. All right, so formatting that gets a little bit more complicated and that I don't really have answers for today. This is stuff that I just had to bookmark and say, these are next steps. So data tables, these read as data only. You really have to like format these correctly, and I'm not sure how to do that yet. I will look into it, and maybe we can do some follow-up classes. You use the tags to check if the cells are marked up correctly. If they're not, it just reads as like a giant table of data. Charts also get a little bit more complicated. They're considered non-text elements and should have associated text to go with it. Forms, you need to have tooltips and be a part of the tag structure in order to really utilize a form. We will touch on that a little bit today. Multimedia, audio should have a text transcript and video should be captioned. So again, not one easy, even though there is the nice full check feature, it's not the end all be all. So this sounds like a lot of work. What are your obligations? So ADA states that an employer must provide reasonable accommodations to employees with different abilities, including acquiring or modifying equipment or devices, providing readers and interpreters, and making the workplace readily accessible to and usable by people with disabilities. Obviously, what that actually means gets a little bit more complicated, especially when we're talking about tech, which is such a rapidly changing field. And so what might meet the definition of readily accessible 5 years ago is probably pretty different for right now. So you kind of have to work with your employees to figure out what needs to be done. I think something that helped me when I started to think about this issue, and I again want to paint that picture of tech as being this very complicated field, because it's changing all the time, and there's definitely an ableist mindset in the tech world, and unless you have people with different needs on the teams who are building these developing technologies, then it's going to be a huge barrier once the technology is released into the marketplace. So like, for example, if a website isn't accessible to screen readers, this came up with Walgreens a while ago, which, if you can imagine, you have a prescription that you need to get from Walgreens and your screen reader can't read the website. That's obviously a huge issue. And so just making sure, and that gets into a different realm that we're not talking about today. We're just focusing on PDFs, but websites need to be accessible too. So environmental factors. Technology has made the legal world much more accessible to lawyers with different needs, but you still have to have the right tools. If you manage a firm, be sure your employees' accessibility needs are met by working with them. You need to collaborate with coworkers and employees with different needs to make sure you're not making their job more complicated for them with inaccessible technology. I think people need to feel more comfortable asking. They need to be able to say what needs need to be met here, because you might not always just automatically know. And so if we can kind of foster that world where communication is a little bit more open, I think it'll make a big difference. And of course, along with that also comes the ability to like accept criticism and accept feedback that might be negative, which isn't always easy. All right, so two other things that I want to point out also is that there's the full check option in Adobe that kind of helps once you have an existing PDF, but you can also kind of start more at the beginning as you're creating your PDFs. And there's something called the setup assistant in the accessibility menu that will help you make certain settings automatic so that it's something that you don't have to worry about when you go to do that full check. And I'll show you how that works in a minute. But so the setup assistant is like the little wizard that walks you through it and does these things automatically. But there are preferences in the reading, forms, and multimedia categories that aren't available through the setup assistant and are only in the preferences dialog box. So it's a little bit more ideal to actually go through and manually set your accessibility preferences, which requires some groundwork and some careful reading of the Adobe website to actually know what settings you need to pay attention to. And that'll vary on a case-by-case basis, so you kind of have to, I can't give you those answers today. So now we can actually jump into Adobe and see some of these things in action. So I have a PDF that we can work with today. This is just a PDF. It has a couple form fields. This is a form that I think I'm technically supposed to sign it when I teach all of these classes. It's whenever a guest speaker comes in and speaks, they have to sign this form that just says that that we're allowed to like post a video of them speaking online, essentially. That's not hugely important right now, though. All right, so first things first, when you get into Adobe, on the right side of your screen, you have this column menu. And on my screen right now, the accessibility menu is visible, but it probably won't be automatically if you have not actually taken a step to do that. So I want to make sure everybody knows how to add buttons to this menu. If you scroll to the bottom of that column and hit More Tools, it takes you to a screen that has a more expanded menu of options in Adobe. If you scroll, there's a section that says Protect and Standardize, and that's where the accessibility option lives. Since I already have it, it just says Open. But if you look at some of these other options that I haven't already added, it says Add, and you would just click on the down arrow and hit Add Shortcut, and then that'll live in that column menu. I do want to point out that does not, you're not like buying anything when you do that. I've had people who say like, yeah, but don't I get charged when I do that? And no, you do not. You don't have to worry about that. These are tools that are already in Adobe, and you can use them. All right, we do have some questions from online. We did get a question, does the CBA plan on making CLE seminars accessible by doing things like adding captions to the seminars? That's a great question. I am unfortunately just a department of one, and I'm a small fraction of all the CLEs that actually happen at the Chicago Bar. So I can definitely bring that up to people. I think that's definitely something that should happen. I don't know how much power I have over it. But I can definitely bring it up and work on getting my seminars accessible at least. That would be great. Okay, so we have added the accessibility menu, which now you see you have these options: the auto tag document, reading options, full check, accessibility report, identify form fields, set alternative text, setup assistant, and reading order. So what we're gonna do right now, I also want to, before we do that, there's another menu option that I want to set so that we can see. It's already set on my computer. It's this little tag button right here along the left side of the screen, where you have the thumbnails option, the different viewing options. If you right click anywhere in that column, you can add all these different shortcuts. If you think that any of these other ones would be useful to you, if you sign a lot of documents in Adobe, the signatures option might be good. But for now, the one that I'm using is tags. And so once you do that, you can see that there are no tags currently in this document. So something that is going to jump out to me even before I do the full check, because I can see that there are no tags, is that I might consider doing auto tag. This does, as far as I can tell, in the limited time that I've had to kind of play around with this, it does a pretty good job of auto tagging things. So I'm going to go ahead and click that. I'm going to hit auto tag document. And, oh, all right. Okay, well, now it's not doing it. This always happens as soon as you get in front of people to demonstrate, but maybe, all right, so it did add 2 tags. So what it did right now, if you click on the different tags, you can kind of see what they're indicating. It tagged the heading correctly, and so it separated it as just a heading. And then it saved everything else as one block of text, which for this specific form, I'm not sure that would be an issue. But if you are working with something that's a little bit more complicated, a little bit more of a complex form, you might want to actually break that up. But for now, I think this should be good. We can go into the full check and see what that thinks. But yeah, for right now, it looks like it's in a logical reading order. Mm-hmm.
Is this auto tag feature, I wonder if it's similar to what happens like when I use a screen reader to open a document. When a document is untagged, I basically get a dialog box that pops up. It says that the document is untagged, and I have options to kind of like tag. It gives me options like infer reading from document, or like left to right, top to bottom, or like a tag based on the raw print stream. I wonder if any of this possibly corresponds to like the auto this auto tag option in Acrobat DC Pro.
So for the webcast audience, the question in the room had to do with does this auto tag document feature correspond with what happens when you receive a document? There's a dialog box that pops up and says, you said document isn't tagged. Do you want to go ahead and like infer structure? I would imagine so. It might be a little bit more workable just because it's on the actual like document creator's end, and so you might have more control over it. But I would imagine that they do correspond. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. So now that we have added some tagging, I'm going to go in and just click full check. So then you get this dialog box that says report options, and it says create accessibility report. and attach report to document. And you can do both. I'm going to go ahead and do both, and I will show you where they each come out. And so that's actual report that you're getting once you have, once you have run the report. All right. You can also, if you don't want to run a report for all the pages in a document, you can select a page range. I'm going to go with the whole, it's only one page, so I'm just going to say all pages. And then there are some features or some options that you can click on or off. You can say document is a tagged PDF, accessibility permission flag is set, etc. I'm just going to leave it all checked because I want as thorough of a report as possible, and then I'm going to hit start checking. And it's pretty quick. So once the report is run, the report, you get this column on the left side of the menu of your screen that says it has different sections. It says document, page content, forms, alternate text, tables, lists, and headings. And then it tells you where the issues are within those sections. So it's telling me that in the document area, I have 4 issues. So I'm going to click on the little down menu. And now you can see that all of the categories that I passed are checked with a green check. And then there are 2 that say they need a manual check. And then there are a few that are a little bit easier to fix. So let's start with those. If I hit the primary language failed box, if you right click on it, you get the option to fix, skip the rule, explain, check again, show report, or options. I'm going to focus on the first 3. So fix, skip rule, and explain. If I click explain, I'll do that in a minute for another one that's a little bit more complicated. But since it gives me the fix option, I'm just going to go ahead and hit that and see what it prompts. So I get this dialog box that says language, English. Is this correct? And I'm going to hit OK. And now it says that I passed that category. So it resolves that issue automatically without you really having to do anything. And then it says, do you want to replace with the updated report? And I'm going to hit replace. Title is another one that looks like I can just right click and fix. And it says that does it automatically, and I just hit replace, and there it goes. And so now I'm left with these 2 issues that need a manual check. So logical reading order. I'm going to click on that, right click, and you have the option to override and say pass. And if there's something so if you look into the issue and you know that you're good to go, you can hit pass. I don't know why you would hit fail, because that's basically says that you know it's an issue, but you're not going to fix it. So don't do that. But when I look at this logical reading order, I don't really know what that means, so I'm going to hit explain. And then Adobe takes you to their website, and it explains it. And it takes you through, and it says logical reading order. Make sure that the reading order displayed in the tags panel coincides with the logical reading order of the document. So I'm going to go back into my PDF, into the tags section, and it does indeed correspond with the reading order, as we saw before. The heading appears first, and then the body of the document appears second. So I'm going to go back into the report, and I'm going to right-click and say pass, because I know that it meets the standards. And then, so the last issue in this section is color contrast, which also needs a manual check. So I'm going to right-click on that, and again, I'm just going to hit explain. And so it takes me back to Adobe's website, and it's slowly taking us to the right place. And so it says, when this check fails, it's possible that the document contains content that isn't accessible to people who are colorblind. To fix this issue, make sure that the document's content adheres to the guidelines outlined in WCAG section 1.4.3, or include a recommendation that the PDF viewer use high contrast colors. So for now, what I'm going to do, I think this is one of those circumstances where you would probably need to know the specific needs of your recipient. And so then you could set it accordingly. But for now, if I go back into my document, my PDF, I'm going to right click on that and say show report. And so, this is where you can actually see the report, and it tells you what is being checked and whether or not you passed it. So I'm going to go back into edit and then preferences. So again, this is all from the dialog box when I hit explain that popped up on Adobe's website. And so I'm going to hit preferences, and then it says replace document colors and use high contrast colors. So right now I'm just using black text on white. I could switch it to white text on black, yellow text on black, or green text on black. It'll just depend on the recipient, what color needs they have. So I'm just going to leave it as is right now and hit OK. And then go back to the checker and right click and say pass. And so you would just keep going through your whole document and doing this for every issue that comes up. So I would here right click, and so the options vary for the different issues, and you just kind of have to go through one by one and fix them or address them however Adobe suggests. And so once you're done with that, I'm not going to take you all through that today because that would be kind of tedious, but you would go through issue by issue. And then, so you can go back and see that report, which is the tab below that in the left column menu. Because when I ran the report initially, I checked that option to actually create a copy of the report and store it on my computer. That is still available on my computer, and it saves wherever you tell it to. I told it to save in my documents folder, which is, so here it is, it's the blank faculty release.pdf.acc report. And so if I double click on that, it takes me to a website where this report is all mapped out. And it's just the same thing that was included in the PDF, but I just want you to know that there's another way to view it. All right, so once you've gone through all of those items on the accessibility full check, and you have resolved or fixed all of them, how do you know that your PDF is then good to go? If you don't have access to a screen reader, it can be kind of a guessing game. What I found in preparing for this was that if you, Adobe has an option where you can have your computer actually read you the document. And so if it makes sense with Adobe reading it, then it should be good for a screen reader. One of our attendees in the room pointed out to me before we started that there is a free open source screen reader called NVDA. I did not know about that before, but that would be probably an even better alternative to this. So that's something to look into. But for now, I'm just going to hit View and then Read Out Loud. And then you get the side menu. And so I'm going to say Activate Read Out Loud. And then back to View, Read Out Loud. And then I'm not going to actually do it right now because I don't have my computer audio hooked up to the webcast. But I would hit read this page only or read to the end of document. And then your computer, it's just like Siri or Alexa or something. It'll actually read the document to you. And so you can see what issues need to be resolved still, or what you might need to call in Adobe support or something for to figure out. Okay, so the last thing that I wanted to point out was the setup assistant. So this is what you would do if you wanted to hopefully save yourself some time and eliminate some of those issues that keep coming up in the full check. If you tailor some settings from the get-go, your PDFs will, as you create PDFs, these settings will be automatically applied, and so it'll save yourself some time. In the accessibility menu on the right, there's the option that says Setup Assistant. And then the wizard pops up and it says, in the next few panels, you will be guided through options that affect how Adobe Acrobat displays documents and interacts with assistive technology. The preferences shown in the panels are initialized to your settings. Each panel will allow you to go back to a prior panel or cancel the process. Your settings will not be recorded until you select the Done button in the last panel. So it says, first we would like to know what assistive technology you are using. This will let us tailor the following options. So it says you can set options for screen readers, for screen magnifiers, or set all accessibility options. I'm going to go ahead and just use that and hit next. And so then you get some more options. And so it says, it comes back to that high contrast, what colors you want to use. And so now if you know who you're preparing the document for, you could tailor it from the get-go so that all documents will be compatible with that. I'm just going to leave it with black text on white for right now. You can set the colors used to highlight form fields and to indicate required fields. You may wish to customize them if you change the colors used in documents. So in Adobe, when you go to like highlight text, that color can be changed and reformatted. Text smoothing can be disabled when displaying in order to provide higher contrast text. And so I'm just going to go ahead and click next. And then, so we're at screen 3 of 5. And so this has to do with reading order, infer reading order from document, or the left to right. You can actually set it. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and click next. More settings. Again, you would just have to know what you're looking for. It requires a little bit of homework on your part. Know the needs that you're trying to meet. But since I'm just running through this, I don't actually have a target audience. I'm just going to go ahead and click next and then done. And so then as I go forward, my settings are going to be more automatic and I'm going to save some time on that full check. All right, but yeah, that covers it for me for what I wanted to talk about today. Again, this is just a crash course 101, very basic level, using the tools that are available in Adobe, how to make documents accessible. Again, I will try to be better at the CBA with programming on this topic and take those next steps. And yeah, we will look into making CLE seminars accessible. I think that's a great idea. It might not be an immediate thing because the webcast technology is complicated and, as you can tell, imperfect. So yeah, we'll do what we can. But yeah, thank you all for joining today. CLE certificates will be sent out after the fact. This hasn't been approved. It will be. Don't worry about that. But it's just pending, and so somebody will follow up with that. All right. Thank you very much.